Black Gold and Broken Dreams. The story of coal miners and the British in Enugu State, Nigeria, in 1950s. Imagine a place so rich in natural resources that it seemed destined for greatness. A place where the earth beneath held enough wealth to transform an entire region. But instead of prosperity, it brought suffering, exploitation, and ultimately, decline. This is the story of Enugu State, Nigeria, and the black gold that was supposed to change everything. I'm telling you this story today because it's not just history. It's a lesson about how wealth can destroy, how resources can enslave, and how an entire people can be trapped in a cycle of exploitation they didn't create and couldn't escape. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because stories like this deserve to be heard and remembered. Before we talk about coal, we need to talk about what was here before. The lands that would become Enugu State were home to the Igbo people, one of Africa's most remarkable civilizations. Every village had a council of elders. Every major decision was made by consensus. Every man had a voice. This wasn't a system designed for conquest or domination. It was designed for community, for equality, for everyone to have their say. The land was incredibly fertile. Yams grew abundantly, so much so that the yam harvest was celebrated with massive festivals where entire communities gathered to eat, drink, and give thanks. Women controlled trade. They weren't sitting at home waiting for men to provide. They were in the markets, negotiating prices, building wealth, running commerce. A woman could become rich. A woman could become powerful. A woman could own land. Men who were ambitious could accumulate wealth, take titles, and gain respect through their own efforts. The Igbo system rewarded hard work. It rewarded intelligence. It rewarded ambition. This is why the Igbo became known as traders, merchants, and innovators. This is why they built networks across West Africa. This is why they prospered. And then, everything changed. By the late 1800s, Britain was colonizing Africa. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't consensual. It was violent, deliberate, and complete. The British didn't respect Igbo democracy. In fact, they found it frustrating. How do you control people who are used to questioning authority? How do you govern people who expect to have a say in decisions? How do you extract resources from people who believe in equality? The answer, according to the British, was to destroy these democratic structures and replace them with something easier to control. They appointed warrant chiefs, men they could control, who reported to British district officers. These weren't traditional leaders. Traditional leaders had to respect the people. Warrant chiefs had to respect only the British. This created a new kind of hierarchy, a new kind of authority that had no roots in Igbo culture, no legitimacy among Igbo people, but all the power of the colonial state behind it. Taxes were imposed. Young men were forced into labor. Traditional practices were banned. Igbo autonomy, that thing the Igbo had fought for and valued for centuries, was simply erased. But the British weren't content with just political control. They were looking for something else. They were looking for wealth. And in 1909, they found it. In 1909, geologists discovered coal, massive quantities of coal, some of the highest quality coal in the world, buried beneath the Enugu Plateau. To the British, this was jackpot. To the British, this meant money, wealth, power, influence. By 1915, mining operations had begun. The Nigerian Coal Corporation was established. And almost overnight, Enugu transformed from a rural collection of villages into a bustling industrial town. Railways were built. The Enugu to Port Harcourt Railway, completed in 1916, connected the coal mines directly to the ocean. Coal could now be extracted from the earth and shipped to Britain within weeks. Electricity plants were constructed. Administrative buildings rose up. Housing was built for workers and colonial officials. Shops and markets sprang up to serve this new population. What had taken centuries to build in traditional Igbo society, a functioning, sustainable economy based on agriculture and trade, was about to be destroyed in just a few decades by a single commodity. The promise was intoxicating. Coal would bring development. Coal would bring jobs. Coal would bring prosperity. Coal would transform Enugu into a modern city. What they didn't tell the Igbo people was the price that would be paid. Thousands of men entered those mines. Some went voluntarily, drawn by wages that seemed good when you had no other options. Many others were forced, conscripted by colonial administrators who met quotas by simply taking men from villages. Imagine descending into complete darkness, hundreds of meters beneath the earth, with minimal equipment, knowing that cave-ins, explosions, and suffocation were real possibilities. Imagine doing this not for weeks or months, but for years, for decades, for your entire adult life. The mines of Enugu in the early 20th century were death traps. Ventilation was inadequate. Wooden supports would rot and collapse. Water would seep in, creating hazards. Equipment was basic, dangerous, and often broken. Medical care barely existed. If you were injured underground, you were carried out and left to whatever happened next. The mortality rate was staggering. Men died regularly. Sometimes it was dramatic, explosions or cave-ins that killed dozens at once. More often it was slow. Coal dust filled the lungs. After a few years, a miner couldn't breathe properly. After 10 years, he was coughing blood. After 20 years, he was dead. A miner in his 30s looked like an old man. His hands were black, permanently stained by coal despite scrubbing. His lungs were scarred. His cough never stopped. TB was rampant. Silicosis, the disease caused by breathing coal dust, was essentially universal among long-term miners. And the wages? They were pathetic. I need you to understand something. This wasn't employment in any fair sense. This was exploitation dressed up as wages. A miner might earn 2 shillings a day in the 1920s and 30s. Sounds like something? Let me put this in perspective. A loaf of bread cost a shilling. 2 shillings a day meant you could barely feed your family, let alone pay for housing or medicine or education. But here's where it gets worse: the company store system. The mines operated Tommy shops, stores where workers had to buy necessities. Prices in the company store were double or triple what they cost in regular markets. So a worker couldn't just take his pitiful wage and buy cheaply elsewhere. He was forced to buy from the company at inflated prices. And if you didn't have enough cash, the company extended credit. They literally kept accounts of what you owed. Deductions were made from your wages, but the interest was enormous. The math never worked. A miner could work an entire year and end up owing the company money. You were trapped, completely trapped. This is what the system was designed to do. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Keep workers desperate, indebted, and powerless. Make them dependent on the company for everything: employment, housing, food, credit.